Last week, the Department of Justice dropped a bombshell lawsuit charging 2 kids with pulling off an NFT scam. When I first heard that, I thought, wow, I never thought this day would come. Finally, the NFT scammers are being brought to justice. But all the videos I watched about this topic were just regurgitating the same headlines, and none of them answered the burning questions on my mind, such as how were they caught? What were they charged with? And most importantly, what can we do to bring more scammers to justice? That's why I printed out and read this entire lawsuit. And oh my goodness, it's even better than I imagined. Like, did you know that these federal agents literally stalked these kids and did a stakeout by their house? No joke, it's on page 15 of this affidavit. That's why I wanted to make this video, to cover what no one else is talking about. But I'm not gonna bore you and read it page by page, because no one's got time for that. Instead, I grouped up their points into 3 main sections. So the lawsuit charged Ethan Nguyen and Andre Lacuna with wire fraud and money laundering. They're actually just 2 20-year-old kids in the Los Angeles area who got caught rug pulling their NFT project. But the charges against them are very serious, and if convicted, they could spend up to 20 years in prison. One thing that stood out to me is that this case was filed by an agent in the IRS Criminal Investigations Division. I would have expected it to be handled by the FBI or some other agency, but it's interesting to see the tax office take the lead here. Anyways, the NFT collection that they made was called Frosties, and they started advertising it back in December of last year. There was nothing too out of the ordinary about their project. They did have an anonymous team, and they promised the world to everyone who bought their NFTs. They promised things like giveaways, airdrops, free mints, a metaverse game, staking, breeding, really the whole shebang. Basically, whatever other projects were offering, they said they would offer too. Frosties also had a roadmap on their website where they wrote that they would immediately start developing all of those features after their NFTs were sold. Well, it turns out they did sell out, all 8,888 of them, at the price of 0.04 ETH per NFT. That turned out to be a little over $1 million worth of proceeds from their sale, which concluded on January 9th. But instead of starting the development phase like they promised, Ethan and Andre executed their rug pull just hours after their sale concluded. Some people in their community noticed suspicious transfers out of the project's wallet, and the website was shut down shortly after. That's when people took to social media and started posting about this project, calling it a rug pull. Some of their Discord moderators were also caught in the crossfire, even though they had no idea what was going on. In fact, Ethan messaged one of the mods and straight up admitted that he never planned on continuing with the project. But he felt bad that the mod was getting skewered by the community, so he told the mod to share a screenshot of their conversation so the community could redirect their anger. Looks like Ethan wasn't a complete sociopath after all, but he did straight up admit to rug pulling with that message. Now, all this happened in early January, but Ethan and Andre were not done yet. They started working on their next rug pull almost immediately. It was another NFT project called Embers NFT, and it was just about to launch in late March before the feds moved in and arrested them. That's why the feds had to move so quickly, because they wanted to stop those two before they could pull off another scam and harm more people. But what's really interesting here is how the feds were able to catch them. Because Ethan and Andre did try to stay anonymous after all. They never shared their real names, they used VPNs to obscure their tracks, and they even used Tornado Cash to launder the coins that they got. So they weren't completely stupid and incompetent. But in the affidavit, the federal agent outlined a complex series of techniques and processes that he used to catch them. This included things like blockchain analysis, a healthy dose of subpoenas, and even some in-person surveillance. When I read all the steps that he took, I thought, wow, the way he was able to build this case from so many different angles was incredibly impressive. After all, he started off knowing nothing about them. Well, he did know that they had accounts in the Frosties Discord server, so that's where he started. He sent a subpoena to Discord and grabbed the IP addresses associated with those accounts. He then went to Twitter and GoDaddy and subpoenaed them as well, because he knew that Frosties had both a Twitter account and a website. Turns out there were some IP addresses that had accessed all 3 services, so he knew he was onto something. The federal agent actually found out pretty quickly who the founders were, because the Twitter account had a real phone number and email address attached to it. And the GoDaddy account tied to the Frosties domain had a real credit card attached. So the agent's job was pretty much done. He knew who the founders were, but he didn't stop there. He wanted more evidence to build the most airtight case possible. So he took the credit card number that he found from the GoDaddy account and subpoenaed the bank that issued it so he could see what else was purchased. In those bank statements, he found payments to Fiverr, most likely for the NFT art, and also to TunnelBear, which is a VPN service that they likely used to obfuscate their tracks. This is key right here, because when the agents looked at the Twitter and Discord logs, they saw more than one IP address accessing those accounts. Now, a couple of them were already tied to Ethan and Andre, but there were more that were unaccounted for. So theoretically, others could have been involved. But when they saw the TunnelBear VPN subscription, they were able to match up those IP address range and more confidently say that it was only Ethan and Andre. Now, all these subpoenas were absolutely crucial for identifying the founders. But another tool that the feds used was blockchain analysis. Because remember, those kids tried to use Tornado Cash to mix and launder their stolen ETH. But chain analysis tools are super powerful these days, and they were able to track a wide net of addresses that the funds flowed to. The agents took the time to identify and mark some intermediate wallets of interest, and they found one particular one which received some Ether from Ethan's Coinbase account. They also noticed that some funds flowed to one of Andre's wallets, which had his ENS name cryptoandre.eth attached. So yeah, the proof really doesn't get much stronger than that. After some time, the funds flowed from those intermediate wallets to Coinbase, which of course knew their identities because they had to go through KYC to sign up. I honestly don't know what those two were expecting. They were never going to be able to use a fiat off-ramp like Coinbase to convert their funds, because every fiat-enabled exchange is getting legit these days, and they all have stringent KYC procedures. So if any shady fund ever arrives at those exchanges, they will know. But I think the biggest bombshell in this entire affidavit was that the feds did physical surveillance of Ethan. The agent wrote that he saw Ethan go in and out of his house in the LA area on certain days. When I read that, I was like, what the heck? Is that even necessary? They already got them dead to rights on the digital side of things. So why do they need to have a stakeout in person? Well, one possible theory is that they were just trying to see where to best arrest him later. I don't really know what's true or not, but who really knows? Anyways, taking a step back, you can see how this case was so incredibly thorough and comprehensive. And they pulled off this whole investigation in just 2 months. Looks like the feds aren't just some clueless idiots. They have immense resources, and they're gonna use all of it to go after bad actors. But even with all their resources, the feds couldn't have done it without the community. After all, it was the community's reports that got them looking into it initially. If no one reported it, the feds may have never started investigating. The lead agent also wrote on page 6 that he tried to reach the victims of the rug pull and asked them for more details. But there were hundreds or even thousands of victims, and he couldn't reach most of them. Mostly because he was trying to do this thing in a low-key manner as to not tip off the suspects. So he couldn't just go on Twitter and be like, hey, who bought Frosties before? Hit me up. Now, this affidavit doesn't actually come out and tell us how we can help in the future. But if we read in between the lines, we can get a good idea. For example, if you're a victim of a rug pull or scam, you can report it to the official government website, which I'll leave a link for below. You can also report it even if you weren't a direct victim. Another thing you could do is to make yourself more reachable in case they need people to interview. Perhaps just post on Twitter that you were rug pulled so the agents can DM you to chat later on. Yes, that does require you to talk to them, which I bet many of y'all hate the sound of. But personally, I think it's worth it because all these scammers and grifters make my blood boil. Their unethical ways of getting millions just makes a mockery of everyone who's trying to do it legitimately. So while talking to the feds is not ideal, I'll do anything that's effective at bringing these people to justice. They've been running loose for far too long, and I refuse to turn a blind eye. You know what's funny though? If Ethan and Andre actually just tried to build a project, They could have avoided all this. They could have paid themselves a fat salary and ended up failing and shutting it down. Instead, they got lazy and arrogant and thought they could get away with it. But as you can see, if you just slip up a tiny bit, the feds will catch you with their massive resources and they may even tail you in person. Either way, I am ecstatic about this case because I think it will make scammers think twice before they do this in the future. Now, what's really interesting is that the SEC wasn't involved at all in this case, so we still don't know if certain types of NFTs are securities, but I predict that we'll get some clarity from them, and that could be what pops the NFT bubble. If you want to understand why, watch this video right here. See ya!